The focus of these set of notes is going to be on introducing the concept of regimes and focusing on democratic regimes and the characteristics of a democratic political system. All right, so first we're going to start with the definition of regime. It is a political system of the state. So it's like either a democracy, authoritarian, or theocracy. Regimes are going to exist beyond the individual government or its leaders. So in the United States, when we have an election and we have new government leaders, we still are operating under a democratic regime. So even when we change out the people who are running the government, the regime stays the same. A government, however, that government is the group of people and the organizations that have the political authority within the regime. And the government can change with elections, but regimes change with revolution. So, like, you would oust a democratically elected official in a military coup d'etat and institute a military authoritarian regime. Or you might see that the leaders of a particular government will slowly change what type of regime you have in a country. Like you see Russia changing from their brief period of democracy in the early 1990s to Putin changing it into an authoritarian regime. All right. So, types of regimes, we're going to start with democracy, and then the next set of notes will be authoritarianism. Basic definition, it's a government by the people. And we're going to go over the different characteristics of democracy in a later set of notes. But you are in a democratic regime, the people are participating, there's competition between ideologies, and liberties are protected. The two different types of regimes are going to be representative or republic, where we get to vote on the people who are going to make the laws for us. You see that in this little diagram here, representative democracy. The laws and rules are made by the elective representatives that the people chose. A direct democracy is going to be not as present in the United States on a large scale, but on a smaller scale, like town hall meetings or neighborhood associations, kind of things like that. Direct democracies are when the people vote, and that will affect the laws and the rules. Also, with direct democracy, within certain democratic regimes, you might see where the government allows people to vote on laws, like in referendum or ballot initiatives, as opposed to the representatives making difficult decisions on certain laws. So in the state of Virginia, where we are located, our state legislators allow us to vote on some ballot measures, and that's an example of a direct democracy. But for the most part, in the United States, most laws and rules are made by representatives. Now, in a democracy, people play an important role within the political system. Political system is the complex organization of people and government that make public policy. So, political systems operate in a very specific environment, which would be the norms and historical traditions of the country, so like a political culture. Our American political system, we have things that we value, like equal opportunity, majority rules, preservation of the American dream, and our public policy is created within that environment. The inputs, what's going into the political system, again, is us, the demands or requests of the people, where we might want to some change or a law that would solve a problem that we're facing, like, again, healthcare. If we feel like we're not getting adequate and affordable healthcare, the government can write a law with enough pressure from the people that would provide us with affordable healthcare. Linkage institutions are also outside of the actual political system, but they do play an important role in providing input for the political system. So that's going to be like your political parties, your interest groups, your media. Especially media, as a gatekeeper, is going to help the government set an agenda The media tells us what's important and what we, the people, should put pressure on politicians regarding. Okay. Then you have state institutions. So this is going to be inside the formal political system. Those would be your branches of government. And then the output are the decisions that the lawmakers make. So you have your demands from your linkage institutions and the people. Inside the political system, your representatives are creating them, and then out comes decisions. Again, the key here with political systems in a democratic regime is that the people play a key role as input. All right, the different types of democracies, so the different types of political systems within a democratic regime. We're going to start with parliamentary democracies. This is very much different than a presidential democracy, which we're accustomed to in the United States. In this situation, people are going to vote for their parliamentary members or their members of parliament, MPs, and then those MPs and those legislators would select the leaders of the executive branch. So when we look at the UK, what you're going to see is that people vote in a district for their members of parliament, and then from those members of parliament who win the elections, they're going to pick a prime minister and their executive cabinet department from the party that holds a majority. The key is that we do not, in a parliamentary system, the citizens do not vote for the executive. Okay. We vote for the parliament, and then the parliamentary members will pick the executive. These are the various places throughout the world that have parliamentary system, and the one that we will focus a lot on is going to be the UK. There is a separation between the head of state, which could be a queen or a king, and the head of government. So in the United States, our president is the head of state and the head of the government, but in a parliamentary system, you actually have two different executives or executive roles. Then in a parliamentary democracy, parliamentary sovereignty is also important, where the parliament and the rules that they write, the laws that they write, are supreme. They are the supreme legal authority. There is no judicial review. If parliament passed a law, the only way that that law can be passed or reversed is with an act of parliament. So let's say in 1979, the United Kingdom's parliament made fish and chips illegal. The only way that fish and chips could not be illegal anymore is if the parliament in 2018 passed a law saying that people could now eat fish and chips. All right, so presidential democracies, a little bit different. People vote for the executive, like we do our president, which is the head of state and government. And that person operates outside of the realm of the legislative branch. Okay. Take a moment to look at this graphic. It's a good example of the difference between the presidential relationship with voters and the parliamentary relationship with voters. There's going to be a separation of power from the legislative branch in a presidential democracy. So we know very well that when the framers of the Constitution created the three branches, they wanted them to be separate and able to check each other. Now, we will study a semi-presidential system, and a semi-presidential system is what we have in Russia, where you have a prime minister, and then you also have a president. So the legislative branch will pick the prime minister, and the prime minister will serve their role, but the voters also get to choose a president, and they essentially would work together. All right, the last thing I want to point out is something called the Democracy Index. This is a ranking by The Economist magazine, which will give scores to different countries and determine how democratic their regime truly is. So if you are dark red, you are an authoritarian regime, like you see North Korea over here. And if you are dark green, you have full democracy, like Canada or Australia. Now, you can see that the United States is a lighter green. Now, the reason why we have dropped in our democracy index score is because of the vagueness of checks and balances, which seems to be going on. Our consistent attacks on the media and other linkage institutions by heads of the government. And all of that stuff is going to play into what the democracy index score is for your country. And if you want to check it out, you can actually find the Economist Democracy Index on their website, and you can search for the different countries, and you get an explanation of the 60 different indicators that go into play when determining how democratic a country's regime is. All right, and that is it for a brief overview of democratic regimes.